A dusty book holds a secret map to your inner treasure. This is not about turning metal into gold. It is about the alchemy of the soul, the timeless process of turning your base experiences and raw struggles into the pure gold of wisdom and purpose. By the end, you will have a complete map of 7 steps drawn from ancient stories to guide your own profound transformation. What if your greatest failures were the necessary fire to forge your strength? What if feeling lost was simply the start of a deeper discovery? Which old story do you think might hold the first clue to your own transformation? That dusty book's map points not to a hidden cave but to a treasure already within you. The ultimate goal of the alchemist was never just a lump of gold. It was the creation of the philosopher's stone, a legendary substance said to perfect anything it touched. But in the alchemy of the soul, the stone is not a physical object you find. It is the state of being you become. It is the fully awakened, integrated self, the part of you that has learned to transform every experience, no matter how difficult, into something of value. This is the central metaphor of our entire journey. Think of the greatest quest stories ever told. The knights searching for the Holy Grail were not just looking for a fancy cup. They were on a relentless journey to heal a wounded king and a barren land, a symbol of healing their own fractured inner world. The Buddha's enlightenment under the Bodhi tree was not about receiving a secret doctrine, but about a profound inner awakening that transformed his very perception of reality. These are all stories of the philosopher's stone. This inner catalyst has specific, powerful qualities. It is the part of you that can take the raw lead of a painful memory and, through understanding and compassion, transmute it into the gold of resilience. It is the capacity to meet the chilling fear of the unknown and, by walking forward anyway, forge it into authentic courage. It is the ability to sit patiently within life's fog of confusion until gradually a new and startling clarity emerges. Visualize the intricate, symbolic artwork of medieval alchemical manuscripts, filled with strange creatures and celestial diagrams representing this inner union. Or consider the precise geometry of a mandala, a map of the cosmos that is also a map of the psyche, guiding the viewer toward center, toward wholeness. The philosopher's stone is that center. It is the still point within you that already knows how to turn every circumstance, every emotion, every challenge into the material for your own becoming. And the first step to activating this inner catalyst is perhaps the most counterintuitive of all. The philosopher's stone begins its work in the fire. Alchemists called the first operation calcination, a process of burning a substance in intense heat until it was reduced to a fine, white ash. For the soul, this is the necessary, often painful, confrontation with your own ego. It is the fire of experience that burns away the rigid identities you have built, the stories you tell about who you are, and the masks you wear for the world. Think of it as a spiritual furnace. Its purpose is not to destroy you, but to humble you, to break down the false self so that something more authentic can eventually be built. This is where every great transformation story truly begins, not in triumph, but in a kind of devastating breakdown. In the ancient biblical story of Job, a man of immense wealth and virtue loses everything: his children, his health, his social standing. He is left sitting in ashes, scraping his sores with a piece of broken pottery. This is a perfect portrait of calcination. Every external marker of his identity, every source of his pride and self-worth, is systematically burned away by catastrophe. The fire forces him to ask the most fundamental questions. Who am I when I am not wealthy? Who am I when I am not respected? Who am I when my body fails me? His suffering incinerates the superficial layers of his being, leaving only the raw, questioning core of a soul. Similarly, in the Bhagavad Gita, the warrior Arjuna stands on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, but his greatest battle is internal. He looks across at the enemy army and sees his own teachers, his cousins, his elders. His bow drops from his hand. He is paralyzed by despair, by attachment, by the crushing weight of his social role and its terrible consequences. His entire identity as a noble warrior, bound by duty and honor, collapses in that moment of profound moral crisis. This too is calcination. The fire of his anguish burns away his certainty, forcing him to confront the deeper truth of his existence. In your own life, this fire might feel like a sudden failure that shatters your confidence. It could be searing criticism that undermines your self-image, or a deep loss that leaves you feeling hollow and unrecognizable to yourself. It is that moment when life asks you, who are you without your job title? Who are you without that relationship? Who are you when your best-laid plans turn to dust? This stage is not about finding answers. It is about the courageous act of enduring the heat of the question itself. It is about allowing the protective shell of your ego to crack and crumble, so you can finally see what has been hidden underneath all along. This ash, this humble residue left after the fire, is the fertile ground from which all real growth will spring. And from this ashen ground, the next stage of the work quietly begins. From the ashes of calcination, a new element emerges, water. The second operation is called dissolution. If the first stage was a purifying fire that burned away the rigid structures of the ego, this stage is a gentle yet total immersion. It is the process of letting everything you thought you knew, every emotion you were holding onto, every old pattern you were clinging to simply melt away. You are no longer a solid, defined statue of your former self. You are becoming fluid, adaptable, open to the currents of life in a way you could not be when you were hardened by certainty. Ancient Taoist wisdom offers a perfect lens for this stage through the principle of Wu Wei, often translated as effortless action or non-doing. It is not about laziness or passivity. It is the profound art of aligning with the natural flow of events, like a skilled sailor who does not fight the wind but adjusts the sails to harness its power. Wu Wei is the practice of dissolving your need to force, to control, to rigidly manage every outcome. It is learning to float in the river of life instead of exhausting yourself by trying to swim frantically upstream. A powerful story that mirrors this messy, necessary dissolution is the parable of the prodigal son. A young man, impatient and certain of his own desires, demands his inheritance early. He leaves his father's home, travels to a distant country, and proceeds to dissolve his entire fortune in what the text calls reckless living. He spends everything. He is left utterly bankrupt, not just financially, but spiritually and emotionally, reduced to feeding pigs and envying their food. This is a stark portrait of dissolution. He is not in the fire of catastrophe here. He is in the water of his own choices. He is letting his identity, his security, his very dignity melt away through a series of surrenders to impulse and circumstance. He hits absolute rock bottom, and it is only in that state of complete dissolution, having lost every external prop, that a new awareness can dawn within him. He remembers his father's house. The story is not about the waste, but about what the waste makes space for. In your own journey, dissolution might feel like a period of profound confusion after a breakup, where your old routines and future plans simply evaporate, leaving you in an emotional soup with no solid ground. It could be the experience of a career change that forces you to let go of a professional identity you worked for years to build, leaving you feeling unmoored and uncertain of your value. It is that sensation when you try to meditate and instead of achieving calm, a flood of old worries, regrets, and feelings you had bottled up suddenly rushes to the surface, demanding to be felt. The work of this stage is to stop resisting that flood. It is to allow the tears, the confusion, the sense of being lost. It is to surrender your attachment to how you thought your life should look, and to simply be present with how it actually is in all its messy, fluid reality. This psychological melting is not a failure. It is a vital alchemical process. By dissolving the hardened shapes of your past, you create an inner flexibility. You become able to see from new perspectives because you are no longer cemented into a single, fixed point of view. You develop a deeper self-awareness because you are no longer pretending to be someone solid and unmoved. You are, for a time, simply a being in flux, and from this fertile, liquid state, something new can finally begin to coalesce and take shape. From that fluid state of dissolution, a clarity begins to form. The third alchemical operation is called separation. Having been burned by experience and dissolved in emotion, you are now left with a mixture of everything that remains. This stage is the patient, mindful work of sifting through that mixture. It is the process of distinguishing what is truly, authentically you from what you have merely absorbed from the world around you. Think of it as panning for gold in a muddy stream. You swirl the water, letting the lighter sediment wash away until only the dense, valuable flecks of genuine gold remain at the bottom. Your task now is to become that discerning prospector of your own soul. One of the most poignant stories illustrating this necessary separation is the parable of the wheat and the tares. A farmer sows good seed in his field, but an enemy comes at night and sows weeds among the wheat. As the plants grow, the servants are horrified to see the two intertwined. They ask the farmer if they should rip out the weeds immediately, but the farmer, with profound wisdom, tells them to wait. Let both grow together until the harvest, he says, for in trying to uproot the weeds now, you might accidentally tear out the wheat as well. At harvest time, the reapers will carefully separate them, gathering the wheat into the barn and bundling the tares to be burned. This is a masterclass in the timing and care required for inner separation. The wheat represents your innate strength, your core value, your authentic desires. The tares are the conditioned beliefs, the people-pleasing tendencies, the fears planted by past criticism or societal expectation. The wisdom of the story is that you cannot always distinguish them in the early, green growth of your life. Trying to judge and purge every unwanted thought or impulse too soon can damage the tender, genuine parts of you that are still developing. Separation requires the patience to let your inner landscape mature, to observe yourself without harsh judgment until the differences become unmistakably clear. Another powerful narrative is the ancient story of Hercules at the crossroads. The young hero, pondering his path in life, is visited by two majestic women. One, named Virtue, offers him a steep, rugged road that leads to lasting honor and genuine self-respect through effort and struggle. The other, named Pleasure, offers a smooth, easy path of immediate gratification and superficial comfort. Hercules must choose. This is separation in its most active form. A moment of conscious discernment where he must separate his deeper calling from the lure of an easier, more applauded life. He chooses the difficult road of virtue, a decision that defines his legendary labors and his ultimate character. In your own life, this stage involves quiet but deliberate introspection. It might look like journaling after a difficult day, not just to vent, but to ask yourself, which of my reactions came from a place of deep truth, and which came from a place of old fear or a need for approval. It could be the process of looking at your calendar and asking, which of these commitments genuinely align with my values, and which am I doing out of sheer obligation or a faded sense of identity? This is where you learn to separate the gold of your true nature from the dross of external expectations. That dross is heavy. It is the belief that you must have a certain career by a certain age to be successful. It is the habit of silencing your opinion to keep the peace. It is the endless pursuit of possessions you are told would bring happiness but only leave you wanting more. The work of separation is to hold each of these thoughts, these impulses, these life choices in your hands and to feel their weight. Ask yourself, does this feel like me? Does this choice lead me toward a sense of integrity or away from it? This is not about becoming perfect or purging all complexity. It is about developing an inner compass, a sense of discrimination that allows you to navigate your life with increasing authenticity. You are learning to harvest the wheat of your soul and consciously leave the tares behind. And once you have gathered this precious distilled material, the real work of transformation can truly begin. This inner sifting reveals a profound truth. You are not one thing, but a constellation of energies. The fourth step, conjunction, is where these separate stars form a new constellation. Alchemists called this the sacred marriage, a mystical union of opposites within the very crucible of your soul. It is the moment when the parts of yourself you have kept divided, the logic and the intuition, the strength and the compassion, the disciplined mind and the wild heart, finally recognize each other as essential partners. This is not about erasing differences, but about creating a profound and fertile harmony. The ancient symbol for this is the rubis, the legendary two-headed being often depicted in alchemical texts. It is a single body crowned with both a solar king and a lunar queen, holding symbols of earth and sky. The rubis represents the fully integrated self, where your inner masculine and feminine principles, your active and receptive natures, cease their civil war and begin their creative collaboration. For a deeper understanding, look to the rich tapestry of Hindu mythology and the eternal dance of Shiva and Shakti. Shiva represents pure consciousness, the still, silent witness, the masculine principle of transcendent awareness. Shakti represents the dynamic, creative energy of the universe, the feminine principle of manifest power. In their separation, the universe is inert, a consciousness with no expression, or a chaotic energy with no direction. But in their sacred union, the cosmos comes alive. Their divine marriage symbolizes that within you, your highest awareness must marry your vital life force. Your quiet contemplation must embrace your capacity for action. Your structured plans must dance with your spontaneous inspiration. When this inner marriage occurs, something shifts fundamentally. The internal noise of conflict begins to quiet. You no longer feel torn between what you think you should do and what you deeply feel is right, because thought and feeling are now in dialogue, not debate. Decision-making ceases to be a stressful calculus of pros and cons and becomes more like a deep listening, a tuning into a wisdom that arises from your whole being. Creativity flows not from frantic effort, but from a state of relaxed inner unity where ideas can connect in surprising and novel ways. Imagine trying to navigate a forest at night with only a tiny, flickering flashlight. You see one root, one stone, one small patch of path at a time, and the journey is slow, anxious, and fraught with stumbles. Conjunction is like the dawn breaking. You can suddenly see the whole forest, the shape of the land, the direction of the trails. You move not from fear of the dark, but with an understanding of the entire landscape. This is the peace that comes from inner wholeness. It is the calm authority of a leader who listens, the compassionate strength of a caregiver who sets boundaries, the innovative insight of a scientist who dreams. Your shadow, those rejected parts of yourself you hid away, is not conquered but invited to the table, offering its raw power and honesty. Your light, your cherished virtues, is tempered by humility, knowing it is only one part of a greater whole. This sacred marriage within is the foundation for everything that follows, for it generates a new substance, a child of this union, which is your authentic creative power. And that power now seeks its own unique and purposeful expression in the world. That inner union generates a quiet, potent energy. This is the stage of fermentation, the fifth alchemical operation. If conjunction was the sacred marriage, fermentation is the joyful, bubbling announcement that this union has taken root and new life is beginning to stir. It is the spiritual germination where all the insights, the struggles, and the hard-won clarity from the previous stages start to interact, to break down old limitations, and to produce something entirely fresh and unexpected. This is the soul's own creative yeast, working silently in the warm dark, transforming the raw materials of your experience into the wine of inspiration. You know this feeling. It is that sudden, electric jolt of understanding that seems to come from nowhere. It is Archimedes leaping from his bath, shouting Eureka, after the principle of displacement clicks into place in his mind. The solution to a problem he had wrestled with for days arrived not through more laborious calculation, but in a moment of relaxed receptivity when his conscious mind stepped aside and allowed a deeper intelligence to speak. His moment of insight was not the work, it was the joyful byproduct of the inner fermentation that had been happening all along. On a far grander, more transformative scale, this is the essence of the Buddha's enlightenment beneath the Bodhi tree. After years of extreme asceticism and deep meditation, after he had dissolved his attachments and separated truth from illusion, he simply sat. And in that state of profound inner stillness and unity, the fermentation reached its peak. The final veils of ignorance fell away. He saw the interconnected nature of all suffering and the path to its end, not as an intellectual theory, but as a direct living experience that flooded his entire being. This was not the acquisition of new information, but the spontaneous eruption of a new state of consciousness from the fertile ground of his inner work. Fermentation feels like a spiritual quickening. It is the artist who, after a period of feeling blocked and empty, suddenly wakes in the middle of the night with a complete melody or a vivid image that demands to be captured. It is the writer who stares at a blank page for weeks, only to have the entire structure of a story unveil itself during a long walk. It is you, perhaps after a period of grief or confusion, feeling a gentle but undeniable pull toward a new interest, a new community, or a new way of seeing your life's purpose. This is not a loud, dramatic event, but a soft, persistent bubbling up from within. It is your soul signaling that the transformation is real, that the old self is composting into rich soil, and that new green shoots are pushing toward the light. This stage requires a specific kind of courage, the courage to trust these subtle signals. The bubbling inspiration can feel fragile, even silly, compared to the solid logic of your old life. That inner voice suggesting a new direction might be drowned out by the practical voice listing all the reasons it will not work. The work here is to protect this delicate fermentation. It is to create space for quiet, for walks in nature, for activities that calm the analytical mind and allow the intuitive, creative spirit to breathe. It is to carry a small notebook, not to force ideas, but to respectfully capture them when they arrive, like catching fireflies in a jar to appreciate their light. Fermentation assures you that you are not just breaking down, you are building up. You are not just surviving your experiences, you are alchemizing them into the very fuel for your rebirth. This new, inspired vision is precious, but it is still in a volatile, gaseous state. It is full of potential, yet it lacks solid form. To bring this vision into the world, it must next undergo a process of intense pressure and consolidation, where inspiration becomes unshakable conviction. That bubbling inspiration now demands a patient hand. The sixth stage of the alchemy of the soul is distillation, a meticulous process of purification and refinement. Think of a master distiller crafting a fine spirit. They do not simply ferment the mash and call it finished. They carefully heat the liquid, collect the rising vapor, and cool it back down, separating the pure, potent essence from any lingering impurities. They repeat this cycle not once, but many times, each round yielding a clearer, stronger, more refined result. Your newly fermented vision, that spark of insight or sense of purpose, requires this same devoted repetition. It is not enough to have a single moment of clarity. You must distill it over and over until it becomes the very water you drink, the air you breathe, the unshakable foundation of your being. This is where fleeting inspiration is forged into enduring wisdom. Consider the ancient art of storytelling. A bard does not recite a tale perfectly on the first telling. He refines it over countless performances by the fire. He watches the faces of his listeners, learns which phrases make them lean in and which cause their attention to wander. He pares away the extraneous details, hones the rhythm of the language, and sharpens the emotional core. With each telling, the story becomes more potent, more alive, its truth more crystalline. Your own new understanding of yourself is that story in its first rough draft. Distillation is the act of telling it to yourself again and again, in different ways, through different experiences, until only the most essential, powerful truth remains. This is the profound purpose behind spiritual practices like meditation, prayer, or mindful journaling. They are not mere rituals, they are your personal distillation apparatus. When you sit in meditation, you are not seeking to empty your mind, but to observe the chaotic vapor of thoughts, worries, and distractions that arise. Each time you gently return your focus to your breath or a sacred phrase, you are performing one cycle of distillation. You are letting the impurities of mental chatter rise and fall away, leaving behind a clearer pool of awareness. With persistent practice, the intervals of clarity grow longer. The reactive habits of doubt, fear, or old narratives lose their potency. What remains is a quieter, more resilient space from which your distilled insight can shine without distortion. This stage demands a particular kind of courage, the courage of consistency. It is far easier to have a brilliant idea than to integrate it into the mundane fabric of your daily life. The gold of your soul must be tested. That moment of compassion you felt in meditation must be distilled into a patient response to a frustrating coworker. The creative vision you had for your life must be refined through the practical, sometimes tedious, steps of building a plan. Distillation asks, can this new way of being survive the heat of a bad day? Can it condense into wisdom when you are tired, stressed, or tempted to fall back into old, easier patterns? This repeated purification is what turns a momentary epiphany into a permanent shift in character. It is what makes your inner gold not just bright but durable, capable of reflecting light even in the darkest of times. And once this essence is fully purified and condensed, it is ready for its final, most powerful operation, the one that seals the transformation forever. The final distillation crystallizes into something unbreakable. This is coagulation, the seventh and ultimate stage of the alchemy of the soul. The purified essence, refined through fire and water, separation and union, now cools and solidifies into the permanent gold of your authentic self. This is not a fleeting feeling or a temporary state of inspiration. It is a fundamental and stable way of being, fully embodied and expressed in your daily life. The long, winding inner quest reaches its destination, not in a distant castle, but right here in the person you have become. In the language of Carl Jung, this is the achievement of individuation, the lifelong process of integrating the conscious and unconscious parts of the psyche to become the unique, whole person you are meant to be. It is not about becoming perfect or special, but about becoming complete, owning both your light and your shadow, your strengths and your flaws, and weaving them into a coherent, resilient self. The ancient Stoics envisioned this state as the ideal of the sage, a person who lives in harmony with nature and reason, undisturbed by the shifting winds of fortune or the storms of passion. The sage is not an emotionless statue, but a being of profound equanimity and compassion, whose inner gold remains untarnished by external chaos. This is the fruit of your entire journey. Think of the wise elder in countless myths and folktales, the one who lives simply in a hut at the edge of the village. They are not there because they have given up, but because they have arrived. They have coagulated, their presence is calm, their advice is clear not because it is complex, but because it emerges from a deep, settled center. They have no need to prove anything, to chase approval, or to control outcomes. They have learned to act from integrity, to respond from compassion, and to accept what they cannot change with a grace that feels almost superhuman, yet is the most natural human state of all. This is what coagulation looks like in a life. It is the parent who, having worked through their own childhood wounds, can meet their child's tantrum not with reactive anger, but with patient, grounded love. It is the leader who, having faced their own fears of inadequacy, can now make difficult decisions from a place of clarity and care, not ego or anxiety. It is you, after a season of great loss, discovering that your capacity for joy has not been destroyed, but has actually deepened, tempered by the understanding that all things are precious because they are transient. The work is complete. The leaden confusion, the heavy doubt, the reactive patterns of the past have been transmuted. They are not forgotten, but they no longer define you. They have become the raw material for your golden wisdom. You move through the world not as a problem to be solved, but as a presence that radiates a quiet, steady light. Your purpose is no longer something you search for frantically. It is something you live moment by moment in your choices, your relationships, and your simple presence. The alchemical map ends here, but your journey, now guided by this inner gold, continues forward not as a struggle but as an expression. The map is now complete, a sevenfold path etched not on parchment, but within the very architecture of your being. From the humbling fire of calcination, where the old self is burned away, to the fluid surrender of dissolution, through the careful sifting of separation, discerning your true gold from the dross of expectation, leading to the sacred inner marriage of conjunction. This union then ferments into inspiration, which must be distilled through patient practice until finally it coagulates into the unshakable gold of your authentic nature. This is the ancient recipe for turning the lead of your struggles into the wisdom that guides your life. Remember, this is not a linear checklist to be raced through, but a spiral, a sacred cycle. You will likely find yourself in the ashes of calcination more than once, or needing to dissolve an old pattern you thought was gone. Each return is not a failure, but a deeper turn of the spiral, a chance to refine the gold with greater skill and compassion. Your current challenge, that difficulty that feels so heavy and opaque, is not a sign you are off the path. It is the very material of the path itself. It is the base metal placed in your hands, asking to be transformed. So here is a question to carry forward from this journey. Look at your life right now, at the predominant feeling or situation you are navigating. Does it feel like a burning away, a loss of something familiar? That is calcination. Does it feel like a confusing, emotional flood where nothing seems solid? You are in the waters of dissolution. Are you quietly discerning which commitments or beliefs truly belong to you? That is the careful work of separation. Recognizing your stage does not immediately solve it, but it changes everything. It reframes your struggle from a random hardship into a purposeful, alchemical operation. You are not lost. You are in the laboratory of your own soul, performing the sacred work of becoming. We would love to hear which part of this map speaks to you most powerfully right now. Was it a particular story, like Job in the ashes or Hercules at the crossroads? Or do you recognize yourself clearly in one of the 7 stages? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let this be the start of a conversation about our shared human journey of transformation. If you found this map valuable, consider subscribing. Together, we can continue exploring these timeless stories and truths, gathering the tools we need to forge lives of deeper meaning, purpose, and unshakable inner gold.